All right, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the program once again. It's Good Afternoon, Ghana, and we're still delving into issues of the economy. So the current deal that Ghana is facing has to do with inflation, or the fast rising inflation. And the analysis that are being made, remember that Professor Steve Hang has actually done another analysis, brought his analysis on Ghana's inflation, and his figure is quite different from what Ghana has. The questions, therefore, is, has he a different inflation basket? What are the components that are into his basket that is giving a different figure? And if that's the case, should we revise our inflationary basket here in Ghana, which the Ghana Statistical Service is using? The big debate on inflation is what we're going to go into this afternoon. Joe Jackson, Director of Operations at Depreciation Finance, will join me. And also, Manasseh Atta-Boahen is also government spokesperson on economy. Wanda Madilo is also a development analyst, and he is also speaking for the NDC as well. He will join me later on in the program. For now, we'll take a breather, and when we come back, we'll start the discussion. Sorry, welcome back. This is Good Afternoon, Ghana, and we're talking inflation, as I said, a big debate about the numbers of inflation. So if the producers will just project it right away so that we get the discussion started on what Professor Steve Hank is saying, an economist based in the U.S. He seemed to be very much focused on, I won't say Ghana, but African countries. He's done a series of posts or tweets about Ghana and other African countries. This afternoon, I think there is a new one that has come about Zimbabwe, where he writes on the tweet that in the face of the surging inflation, Zimbabwe is finally considering the establishment of a currency board 14 years after one first proposed one. Today, I accurately measure inflation of 487% year, nearly 2.5 times the official rate. A properly designed currency board will smash inflation. And he has brought, the figure. So if it's there, he's brought the graph. If it's there, can we have them on the screen? Both what he said about Ghana and what he has said this afternoon. All right. Okay. I'm told that it's not ready, so when it's ready, we will deal with it. But in the meantime, let me welcome Wanda Madilo, who is already joined me in the studio, development analyst here. Wanda, you're welcome. Good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. All right. So, right. We'll have Manasseh Atta-Boahen, government spokesperson on the economy. So when Manasseh is ready, I think he'll join in. Also, Joe Jackson is Director of Operations at Depreciation Finance. He will also join us with the discussing. Wanda, let me come to you first. So as a development analyst, not as a political party member, but as a development analyst, the figure we have put out as a country, and let me just set the record straight, that Steve Hank's figure it has given to Ghana is that his tweet, he says, in Ghana, the official inflation rate has surged to a 19-year high of 70% year. Now, that's fiction. He says that's fiction. Way off. Today, I accurately measure inflation in Ghana at a sky high of 61.17%. 61.17%. That's 1.9 times the phony official rate. So he wasn't charitable with us. His words were quite strong. He says that our rate was phony, and it's about 1.9 times what the official figure is. So as a development analyst, how does it come to you, first of all?
Well, I want us to, first of all, understand that this business of we only relying on a very what word would I use? A very hampered, institution like Ghana Statistical Service, even the Bank of Ghana, and all the other institutions that give sets our figures is problematic. And I think that is why over the years we've had all this, we've had to rebase the economy from time to time. I know from in 2018 or 19, the Government Statistical Service decided to open up the basket. We used to have 267 items in the inflation basket, and as of 2019, it's been changed to 307 items in the basket. Now, even before that, it used to be a lot more skewed, but now we have a bigger, items in the basket, or we have a larger pool of items in the basket, which is up to 307.
That's where my argument is. But hold on, I think that the items in the basket maybe would have to be considered. Okay. But let's take a breather. We'll come back just in a second. Give us a breather. Good afternoon, Ghana. All right, so I was with Wanda Madilo when he was talking about the inflationary basket. Wanda, apologies for the sound. We had to fix the sound there.
So prior to 2012, all we had was something a little over 267 items in the basket, and then by 2018 we opened it up to 40 more items were added, so 307 or so thereabout. Normally in mathematical, computations, when the base is bigger, the outcome will definitely be smaller, which is the denominator. So as you have expanded the base, you would have expected that even inflation would have shrunk within that point. So if you watch in 2018, 2019, thereabout, inflation figures were actually lower than as expected. But you see, reality is beginning to dawn on the economy now, because when you have excess money in the system that is not being used for production, or is not needed, these are some of the things you are going to have, happening, because now we have so much money, fewer goods being chased here and there, and so inflation will skyrocket. You know that, talk about cement alone, which is one of the major has major use in this country. From 2016, it was just around 40-something Ghana cedis. Today, it's crossed 60% mark. So these are the frequent things we use, or the 307 items in the basket are the things we use daily. Alcoholic items, non-alcoholic items, foodstuffs, cement, and all that. Those things are things people buy daily. And so when you measure them, you do the computation, you are likely to determine at what rate the money in our hands are depreciating. So if I could use 10 Ghana cedis to buy, five again of tomatoes, 5 pieces of tomatoes, and today I can't use that same 10 Ghana cedis, it means that your money has depreciated in value. But it doesn't mean that the things you are producing have gone better or any good. But you now have so much money, and yet you can't even find the things to buy. So we have a challenge. My challenge has always been that we have an agric ministry that has a major role, because a large chunk, about 34% of the items if you compute it to 100%, 34% of the items in the inflation basket are food items. And so when government launched the Planting for Food and Jobs, the warehousing project, and all those projects, you would have expected that immediately inflation was going to shrink, because once you are producing so much for the system and people have it to buy, we don't have to chase it again with the monies we have. And so there will be surplus of the food items in the system. But we didn't see that. And it's strange, because the so-called the agric ministry says that they have spent 5 billion Ghana cedis of money worth Ghanaians' taxes to invest in the Planting for Food and Jobs. And today, inflation has gone over the roof. And we are wondering what was the impact of that, because things like fertilizer distribution, things like Planting for Food and Jobs, things like provision of inputs, irrigation for farmers and all that, are things that, even though you look at them as projects, they are actually projects to manage the economy. And if you tailor them well, you get the results. We have seen, and we have always said this from the beginning, that government has been engaged in so much frivolity when it comes to expenditure. You are spending so much money on free SHS that we're not even getting the value. We are not saying cancel it. We said, at the time, in our last elections before, in our manifesto, we said review the program, make it tailor-made, let it be directed at those who need it. Don't just throw it out there and then there are no results for it. Government going into a spending of its own in under COVID alone, you spent 12 billion. COVID was with us, especially when you talk about the height of it. It was only for 3 weeks. Excuse me, I'm saying 3 weeks because that's when we had the lockdown.
Right.
And the lockdown was only in Greater Accra and some parts of Kumasi. Yet government over the period spent 12 billion. This is aside all the private donations, all the PPEs that were donated, even the hospital were given out by individuals and all that to the government to augment, what was happening, including Alibaba and Co. and all the drug companies that have donated vaccines to Ghana. Yet my government says that they have spent over 12 billion Ghana cedis in curbing the tide with COVID. You know what is interesting? Within the COVID period, we were told that those expenditures were actually to cushion the economy. They were told that those expenditures were actually to help people to, go back into production so we don't feel the impact of COVID. But today, here we are. We are blaming everything on COVID, as if Ghana is the only country that went to COVID. I have just checked, in Ukraine, another example of how they put the blame. In Ukraine, for instance, their inflation as of today was about 17%. Today, Ghana is at 30%. How do you blame that? Where the bomb is falling, where the people are suffering, where they are going through the challenges, they are doing better than us. Go to nearby Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire is doing so far better. Under COVID in 2020, when we grew at 0.4%, Cote d'Ivoire grew at 1.9%. Where lies, the management, proper management of the economy? And how do you marry this with all the talks about we have the men, we are better managers of the economy, and that the inflation exchange rate was undercover and locked and all that?
Okay,
how do you marry
now,
some of these things?
Right now,
these are the difficulties
now
we
you're
have.
going into the political.
No, not the political.
The political.
When you spend, we're saying that when you spend in the wrong areas, these are some of the things that happen. When there's so much leakages. Leakages only mean that so much money is entering the system without commensurate production.
Right.
So recently we were told that they had printed over 20 billion. They came to deny it, claiming that it's not printing, it's an electronic print, it's an electronic release, and all that stuff. These are the things that are beginning to show that so much money has come into the system when we were not making any production along any line of consumption or anything of the sort. Look at the figures. You will understand what we're talking about.
Right, I'll come back to you. Let me go to the phone. Manasseh Atta Boaheng has joined us via phone. Manasseh is a government spokesperson on the economy. Manasseh, thank you for your time. Welcome to Good Afternoon, Ghana.
Yes, good afternoon, Anne, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us as well. Manasseh, so you must be uncomfortable with the recent current tweets about Ghana's economy by Professor Hank, right?
Certainly so.
Why so?
Yes, because he gives his own rate for inflation. Of course, indeed, we accept that there are issues in the economy. No one anywhere can lie to you that things are not tough in the economy. And the president, on several counts, has admitted that indeed times are hard. So, of course, we admit and we are putting a lot of effort to ensure that all these hardships are ameliorated so that Ghanaians will have some kind of relief. So we are not happy with some of these economists even going ahead to give high rates that, in the Ghana's inflation probably might be around 80% and those things.
So if you do accept that things are hard, I think it's also fair to accept that it's numbers and data you're dealing with. Steve Hank's, analysis on our economy puts us quite in a bad state, that the realistic figure that he thinks the inflation stands, it's more than what our official figure is, which is 31.7%. In fact, for him, he puts us above 60%. Why do you think that he says that what we have put out, he calls it a fiction? And he thinks that it's actually a way of deceiving the people. And he rates us at 61.17%. I'm not so sure of his inflationary basket, though, but this is where he puts us.
Yes, so Annie, just as you rightly said, we work with facts and data. So once we are having the inflationary figures from the Ghana Statistical Service, the year-on-year inflation for July 2022 being pegged at 31.7%. That is what we work with. If he has another data, then he can of course come up with that. But just making speculations that indeed our inflation probably is around is over 60% are things we will treat as mere talk and devoid of any fact.
Without necessarily going into the figures of what we're seeing, the government is putting up posturing as though it is not welcoming any analysis from any outside or international community, including the rating agencies. We saw the finance minister and some of the comments he made after Fitch, S&P, and Moody's, did their gradings and brought it out. And Steve Hank, there's been a consistent attack on, I don't think that Steve really has any interest in Ghana. He's a professor. We can give him that regard and hope that he will do a duly correct job. Why won't government rather take a posture as though it is welcoming any different analysis and maybe will decide to look into it?
And so what we have done as government is to express our disappointment in the ratings that we have received recently. That is not to say that we haven't seen it or we are throwing it out completely. Of course, we know these rating agencies are international agencies and they have their own interests. But whatever be the case, once they come up with some kind of ratings, we as government sit back and assess the situation, the reasons for which we were downgraded. And when you even go through the reasons given by S&Ps, for example, they admit clearly, just as the IMF team also concluded in their report, that indeed the external shocks of COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine has really affected our external and fiscal imbalances. It has made it ballooned, and they also point to the fact that there has been demand for dollars because most of the investors are disinvesting, especially in emerging economies. We know that about $30 billion have been taken out of emerging economies. So when you look at the reasons for which they brought the downgrades, these are external shocks the country has been trying to abase itself with it. Even at the beginning of the year, our only disappointment, of course, is with the fact that they are not appreciating the effort the government has made from the beginning of this year to ensure we are able to get back on our desired fiscal consolidation path. And by this, I mean, if you would recall, we passed the e-levy bill just a few months ago. E-levy suffered for 5 months before it began to work as a law. And so, I mean, certainly, if you have a major tax measure and there has been some challenges with it, it would affect the revenues you are able to raise. But in any case, we've been able to pass the tax exemption bill, which would ensure government will also, raise a lot more revenues from that regard. Then also the fees and charges bill has also been passed. So we would have thought that these rating agencies would have factored in the conscious efforts government has made to ensure that we revamp our revenue mobilization and also ensure that we cut down on expenditure. We have announced a lot of expenditure cuts, which will ensure that we have a lot of revenues in our reserve. And also, if you've been following, you realize that we have engaged the IMF. And with the engagement with the IMF alone, we are getting some positive feedbacks. And it would also send positive signals to other multilateral companies to invest in our economy. Very soon, we will be getting the cocoa syndicated loans, which will amount to some $1.3 billion. Then also the African Export and Import Bank's loan has also been approved of some $750 million. So all in all, we know we have challenges with the economy. And our biggest challenge, as we all know, is that the amount of dollars we have in our economy is too small to match up with our import bill. And so with this IMF program and with the loans we are getting from the cocoa syndicated loan and the Afro-Exim Bank, all this will ensure the country would have some dollars in our reserve to meet the demand.
So Manasseh, it's realistically, foreign exchange reserve will definitely not be accrued or increase in the next few months. It will take quite a while for us to go there. We have low-hanging fruits that we can deal with. There's been calls about changing of the faces of persons in government. There's been calls about cutting down government, which currently government is spending about 37 billion on salaries. And so these are low-hanging fruits that are readily, making itself available for us to take, consider. But we are mentioning the macroeconomic measures we've taken, which in the short term are not going to be yielding results anytime soon, because we are in a deep hole now, and we need to get out, at least to be hovering around until we can establish ourselves properly.
Exactly. So, I mean, yes, there has been several calls on the president to change, I mean, some of the ministers he is working with. And we all know that the buck stops with the president. So he has the final say in some of these things. It's up to him to, I mean, as and when it will be necessary, do the necessary, reshuffling. He has said clearly that he re-examines the work of every minister. He assesses them every now and then, and so he knows they are doing good job. And if not for some selfish interest by some people, I mean, we don't know why people will be calling on the president,
Do
trying to
you
put
do
pressure
you
on the president
agree? Do you
to do.
agree? Do you agree with the president on another session?
Yes, I do. I do that indeed. He assesses all his ministers every day. And so when a minister is performing or if a minister is underperforming, the president has knowledge of that. And if the president also feels that a minister can perform better at a different ministry, he also knows that. And so at the right time, if it is necessary, he surely will do the reshuffling. But he would not, of course,
That
fall
does
to
that
the
mean
pressure
that
people are giving him.
does that mean that as an economic a government spokesperson on the economy, you don't appreciate speculations in the economy and how it affects the economy? As currently we are in a junk category, which actually means that you are in a highly speculative state where you would have to take advantage of some of these measures that will improve upon the speculation a bit.
I appreciate the essence of speculation, but the point I'm making, especially with issues concerning reshuffling, is the preserve of the president. Of course, when you look at the rate at which the cedi is depreciating, you realize speculation also plays a huge role. And so, as government, what we are doing is to ensure we cut down drastically on expenditure and also to raise revenue. If you've been following, you realize that the Smith has made a report that they've been able to delete some 21,000 ghost names from their pension payroll, and it has saved the country some 312 million Ghana cedis. National Service Secretariat has also reported saying that they've been able to delete about 14,000 ghost names from their payroll, and it has saved the nation some 114 million Ghana cedis. So going forward, these are our targets to ensure we are able to, with the digitalization drive, raise more revenues and also cut down on expenditure so that we'll be able to put ourselves in a better form to draw investors to invest.
Manasseh, hold on. Let me have you come in.
Well, I think that government still remain very clueless about what is happening in this economy.
Manasseh, just in case you're not sure, we're in the studio with Wanda Madilo, right?
They
Thank
seem
you.
to
All
they
right.
seem to believe that manna will fall from heaven, and that you need to raise more revenue. They need to do this. They need to do that. And we agree that we need revenue as a country. Now, but Anne, tell me, if I live in a house with you, and my inflow as maybe the father of the house is 10,000 Ghana cedis, and then instead of staying within my budget constraints, what I have, I decide to borrow extra 10,000 Ghana cedis from somebody else. It's just a matter of time. You may enjoy for that particular month, but the following month, you would have to cough that up. And that's what is happening to us virtually now. From Kwame Nkrumah until the MPP took over, the entire debt of this country was 120 billion or 122 billion Ghana cedis, if you so wish to call it. And the 6 years of this government, and I'm not talking about percentage increases or whatever of the sort. I'm talking about just the quantum 6 years within which they have been in power. That debt has moved from 120 billion to some 360 billion. And this government is one of the few governments that under their tenure, almost all the time that we have collected revenue, they have exceeded the revenue targets. And so when you hear them talk about inflows, we are dealing with inflation, which is saying that you have so much money in the system already, but we are not producing enough. And unfortunately, it is this same government that was trumpeting the fact that we needed to do production over taxation. And anytime they talk about revenue, that is taxes. Period. There's nothing else to put to it. Because if you go and borrow money and it's time to pay and you don't have to pay, you tax the individuals, you tax your citizens in order to raise the money. And so I didn't think that a government such as the MPP will be the one talking about revenue. And all they know about revenue is to raise taxes or go on the euro bond market and then, raise funds. We have stated as a political party, in opposition now, that one of the things they can do, first of all, is to call for a consensus. How do we reach a consensus? There are lots of men in this country, fine brains, who understand the economy better and can help this government steer their affairs, to safety well enough. Yet the president won't listen to any of this. There have been calls for, some resolution of the EMT, which is the economic management team, and all that, how to reconstitute them and get some fresh brains in there. That won't happen. People who even call for reshuffle, look at the way the president addressed them, that they are jobless and that they didn't have a job. That's why they would make some of those comments. I mean, these are the things. If you talk about speculation, it is this same government themselves that is engaged in the speculative, propaganda that is costing them the pain. We have also said, downsize your government. It is only under this government we had ministers up to 100 and something. Almost throughout history, we have only had about 80 something, 84, 87, the highest. This government, in their first tenure, had almost about 115, ministers of state. Look at how much is being spent on one ministry or the ministers. The reckless borrowing is brought us to this level. This government told us some time ago that, the reason for inflation at the time was because profits were being repatriated by, foreign businesses. And so normally in the first quarter, you have some of these things happening. In the second quarter, third quarter, things get normalized. Where are we right now? Are we in the first quarter? Are we in the second quarter? We're actually in the third quarter, if my math is right. And yet inflation is on the steep. And nobody seems to be saying anything. We also said that try and boost agriculture. It is only under this government that one of the things we discovered was that even fertilizer, that used to be, a bit easier for farmers to access. Today, it's also a mess. We are told that fertilizers are being taken abroad, they are being shipped out of this country and all that. Some of these problems have been there. There will always be black markets. So you as a government have to be responsible enough to deal with the challenges. It is their inability to deal with the challenges we have that is getting the spillover in this manner.
So, Manasseh, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
So there's this issue with cement. Cement didn't used to be in the inflation basket. But I think by how it was going, its prices and the effect it was having within the economy, it was then revised that cement be added to the inflationary basket. So assuming we do not know what is making up Steve Hank's basket, but maybe there are some commodities he is also considering. Is that not possible that just as it happened to cement before, maybe there are some more commodities that at this point in time we can't be considering?
Yes, of course. So with the issue of cement, I even understand that the paper, the packaging alone, some of these items, the paper are even imported. So when you have just a common paper being imported before it could be, bagged, then certainly with the issues happening around the world with world inflation, with most even US and the UK experiencing 30-year and 40-year highs in inflation, certainly the price of cement would go up. And then again, it's not true that the government is clueless. My brother asserted to the fact that government is clueless, and that is not true, because government, of course, knows what's happening. And we accept that indeed times are hard, things are really difficult. And we are putting in a lot of critical measures to ensure we are able to deal with most of these issues. So it's not true that government is clueless. And he said we believe manna will fall from heaven. Who believes manna will fall from heaven? We don't believe.
At the point, I'm not sure how government
throw money on us.
I'm not sure how government was doing projections, but I remember some 3-4 months back when people were saying, or analysts, better put, analysts were saying that Ghana was in crisis. Government officials were defending and saying that, Ghana was not in crisis and that Ghana was just facing financial challenges. I remember that. And so if today we find ourselves at where we are, it is a little frustrating for government to put up a particular posture, which is as though it's not listening to anybody, where you know that you cannot govern on your own. You govern on the basis of, aggregates of opinions and analysis within the economy. Is that not what government should be?
Government is not putting up a poster to project as though we are not listening to anybody. And indeed, even about 4 months ago, before we went to IMF, if you would recall, at the beginning of the year, in January, February, March, the rate of inflation was so high, and we were still experiencing fast depreciation of the cedi. And so, when the president called for cabinet meeting earlier this year, if you remember, in March, April, right after the meeting, he called on the governor of the Bank of Ghana to put in place some measures, monetary policy measures, to ensure we are able to arrest the rate of inflation. Then also the finance minister also came to announce some expenditure cuts and also some revenue measures to ensure we are able to squeeze ourselves as government to raise more revenue and to cut down on expenditure so that issues of inflation and cedi depreciation will also would resolve. So government is not putting up a posture as if we are not listening. We listen a lot. There are lots of consultations going on. And of course, most of the time, just as my brother said, we have various meetings. You have economists, professors holding meetings. Even I think earlier this week, Stanbic had one meeting at Labadi Beach Hotel. Most of us were there. We listened. Lots of policy advice.
You have just 1 minute remaining.
Okay, so I think we've just run out on Manasseh. The producers will try and get him back. Let's find out exactly what government is doing. We've run out of cash on air, so let's see if we can restore him for him to, explain. When it comes to his response to government not putting up a posture, we've had members within the NPP who have openly and publicly called on the president to, do a reshuffle. But of course, the response is what we have today. I don't know how maybe Manasseh is seeing what we on the other side are all seeing, or what the media is seeing, what opposition is seeing, and what even members of his party are seeing.
First of all, we have to understand Manasseh from where he comes from. He is speaking for government, and to be speaking for government is actually giving oxygen to the president's actions and inactions. I agree, but I mean, he's been called to speak for government, and so his opinion now may not matter. Largely, you would have to speak about what you have been told to say, and so we cannot blame him that much. What we are saying is that the president has not been able to appreciate the valuable, knowledge within the Ghanaian society. For instance, in 2015, when we had challenges with the economy, one of the things President John Mahama did was to call for a consensus. You remember this consensus, this Century Accord? This very government decided to boycott it, claiming that we lacked ideas and that we were clueless and we were incompetent. And so if we cannot manage the economy, we should get off the scene and they can do better. Here we are today. The reality has dawned on all of us. For the first time in the last 19 years, this is the time we're having inflation over 30%. Even granted, Steve Hanks, predictions were wrong. Is it a joy? Is this something to be proud of? The president, as he speaks to all of us, is he proud that he has led this country backwards, 19 years behind? We are making progress. Sometime in 2012, 2013, 2014, inflation figures were good. It was actually, below a double digit. President Mills, for instance, led this country with single-digit inflation for 36 months on the bounce. And it was at that time that this same president now, then opposition leader President Akufo-Addo, called President Mills Professor Doolittle. What is he doing right now? It was within those periods. He was bold enough to criticize the president at the time and said he was doing little about the economy. Today, inflation is in 30%. Don't talk about exchange rate, because today, if you go to get a dollar, you have Ghana cedis, you want to get a dollar, you will pay over 9.3 Ghana cedis to just find $1.
Right.
That is where we have gotten to.
Okay.
It's not about knowing the problem. It's about dealing with the problem. We have heard enough about we know the problem. What are you doing about the problem?
Okay, we'll have a video from the Bank of Ghana. I think we were there to record what the Bank of Ghana statement was on the situation in the economy. But Joe Jackson has joined us, and Joe Jackson, thank you for your time. You're welcome to Good Afternoon, Ghana. Hello, Joe Jackson.
Good afternoon.
Good
Good to
afternoon.
be on
Right.
the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, we're doing the analysis of whether or not government has put up a posture of really not paying attention to most of the analysis and recommendations that are coming in. Government has indicated what it is doing, maybe, for example, at the macro level, but I was considering, low-hanging fruits that government could be cutting and will give us the results now, which includes salary cuts that will really include the government cutting down its, government size and considering some other things that we can do immediately to save some money in our kitty. What can we do now? Do you think that my analysis should be accepted?
Okay, now, if we are specific about the depreciation of the cedi, there's actually very little the government can do now. Our reserves have run low. The value of the cedi is just a simple matter of demand and supply. If there are enough cedis out there, I assure you the cedi would not. If there are not dollars out there, the cedi would not depreciate as precipitously as it has done. There's very little we can do in the short term. In the medium term, there's a lot we can do. Export more. We've seen in times past where our exports went up, non-traditional exports went up tenfold, where we got the mines going and this, and there are a lot we can do. At this moment, we just have to brace ourselves. There's not that much the government can do. The government is actually just playing for time, waiting for the cocoa loan to come through. That's about $1 billion plus US dollars to bring in some more dollars. Also waiting for trying to get the proceeds of the $750 million loan that was approved. There's very little we can do in the short term. We cannot improve our ability to bring in dollars in the short term. So please brace yourselves for a wild ride.
Scary picture you're painting to us, Joe Jackson.
It's not about painting a bleak picture. It's about being realistic about what can be done. It's not about the bleak picture. Listen, the seeds of our challenges were sown a long time ago. And when we what the situation we are in now is not unexpected. Some of us have been talking about this for a long time. So at this moment, there's very little you can do in the short term. We are waiting for when and anyway, when I say the short term, remember that the cocoa loan will kick in by mid to end September. So the forward sales of cocoa, so that alone will kick in some weeks to come. But hey, brace yourself. It's not going to be simple.
Joe Jackson, what about, what can we consider within the short terms? If let's move away from the forest reserve and look at actually saving some money within the kitty, at least what we have, and protecting it for other essential, policies and projects government must undertake. What can we do immediately?
Listen, there's one thing that we must do, which is to dramatically and significantly cut expenditure in order to restore confidence of those who give us dollars, not necessarily for goods and services, but those who come and bring dollars into this economy. In order for those who are taking cedis and going to store them as dollars to reverse that flow. we have to cut expenditure. And when I say cut expenditure, please, that includes some of the sacred cows that we've put there. Free SHS, Agenda 111, Ghana Care Sobatanpa, the size of the government. We must sit down with labor and be realistic about how much we can pay them.
Right.
Because labor alone takes away 55% of all income earned by this state. Madness is doing the same thing and expecting different results. At this moment, we must do different things. And doing different things includes sitting down with the opposition so that we are not going to score points from the hard decisions we have to take to fix poor, broke Mother Ghana.
But this is, the time government is also paying no heed to calls of this nature and such suggestions of cutting expenditure, sitting with the opposition and making a having a national conversation and all that.
Well, this is what I will say. We saw the same thing happening at the beginning of the year when a lot of us say we have to go to the IMF, we have to go to the IMF, we have to go to the IMF, we have to go to the IMF. And what happened? At some point, we got through. And we woke up one morning to the announcement that the president had instructed the Minister of Finance to engage with the IMF. We have to keep saying it. Cut expenditure, cut expenditure, cut expenditure. And my belief is that at some point we will get through to the powers that be.
Let me engage you on Steve Hank's latest inflationary figure. It puts Ghana. It says that the 31.70% that the statistical service gave us is a phony one, and he rather puts us on 61.17%. What could be his formula for this calculation?
I don't know Steve Hank's formula. I do understand the formula used by them. The statistical service. They give us a breakdown of details.
Right.
Right? I may quibble with one or two pieces of their basket or how they calculate it, but I can understand how they calculate it. I'm not sure I understand how Steve Hank calculates this. He's a much more well-known figure than I am. But in this case, I will go with my own statistical service. That's who I know, that's who I understand, that's who I believe.
But is it worth considering, knowing who he is, a renowned economist, that we may want to look into what went into his basket?
Well, listen, everybody can calculate anything. I can calculate stuff, right? And the reason why I'm not too excited about Steve Hunt is that he has, in times past, made some pretty, I would say, wild statements about Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them which I've disagreed with publicly.
Mm.
So at this moment, I've heard the 60%. In the basket of goods, there's a certain amount of discretion that is available for you to select your basket of goods. You can quibble with the discretion and the basket that was used by the statistical service. But I don't know how you can sit in the US, not be on the ground in Ghana, and claim that your calculation is a lot more accurate than those who are here and those who can explain how they do it. You're looking at certain measures and estimating 60%. You're entitled to your estimation. And since you're such a well-regarded character globally, that's fine. But me, sitting in Ghana, understanding what the statistical services do, and each time the head coming to explain how he arrived at that calculation, I go with the statistical service.
Right. We're still on Good Afternoon, Ghana, and we're having a discussion with Joe Jackson. I have Wanda Madilo also with me in the studio. Manasseh, who speaks for government in terms of economy, also was with us. But I think we'll take a quick breather. When we come back, we'll wrap up. All right, you're welcome back to Good Afternoon, Ghana. I'm in the studio with Wanda Madilo. We're discussing the issue of the inflation, the big issue about it, whether or not we can do something about to protect the Cedi. Manasseh Atapwahin speaks for government on the economy, and also Joe Jackson is the director of operations at Deluxe Finance. He was with us via Zoom. Joe Jackson, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. So we're wrapping up. So give me your final words before we go. You're saying that we can only keep, shouting out loud, hoping that government will hear some of the suggestions we're putting on the table.
We've got to continue speaking. The people in power are not stupid, and they will at some point hear us. The other thing is this: to the Ghanaian investor public, I say to them that don't panic. Don't panic. These are tough times, but don't panic. There's light at the end of the tunnel. You don't take investor decisions in a panic. You sit down with a cooled head and then you take those decisions. There are a lot, the Cedi has tanked, but I will say to you, don't panic. In a few weeks, there'll be some relief.
Okay, I think we've lost Joe Jackson there. Have
I'm
we?
here.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
I'm here. And to the government, listen, the situation is dire. The risks we face are dire. And I say to them clearly, even as we say to the investor that don't panic, we say to the government, you should be panicking. If anything goes wrong, this thing could be changed. So I say to them, you need to listen.
Joe Jackson,
you need
it's
to
not
take corrective measures.
It's not the topic on the table, but let me just run this by you. We have an issue currently at customs, concerning Labian Cat Company, and the debate that is surrounding that, the action the SP took because the company evaded tax, and we have the customs boss also coming out to defend it. Considering the situation that we're in, persons of this nature who find themselves in such sensitive offices that are supposed to be helping the country generate revenue, what should be their posture?
Listen, at this moment, you have no business granting tax reliefs. Well, there's some indication that it's a practice and it's been there. But we need every Cedi we can find.
Right.
We need every Cedi, and anybody who is a tax official of any sort has no business cutting anybody slack. That's not the posture we should be in. And I'm not surprised that today there's an intimation in the press that there's going to be a shakeup of DRA. We need every cent of revenue. You heard our Minister of Finance saying that they're going to try and plug every loophole with regards to e-levy. How can you then be creating new loopholes with regards to the ports and authority? No.
Right. Joe Jackson, thank you. I'm grateful for your time this afternoon. Joe Jackson is the Director of Operations, Deluxe Finance. I'm still in the studio. Wanda Madilo, final words before.
My final words. We have tabled a few things that we think government can do as a party. We have said that government must bear responsibility. Finance Ministry, Vice President, the President himself, they must show leadership in a time like this. We have said that the EMT needs to be reconstituted, bring in fresh ideas. Even if you decide not to do a reshuffle, Just bring in some new ideas into your economic management team. Stop blaming COVID and Ukraine. They are not the only reason. The reduction in government expenditure, very frivolous expenditure. Cut them now. And they have to be cut for us to have a breather. Downsize your government. We said that. We said limit borrowing. We said that. Government has also had a windfall of about 550 million from petroleum, as a net exporter of petroleum products or crude oil or whatever you want to call it. Do you know that for the past 3 months, LEAP has not been paid? I mean, people living on the livelihood empowerment program, they have not been paid. And how do you really intend to cushion those down there that are really suffering if these interventions are not available? We have not for the past years, LEAP per person has been 62 or 63 Ghana cedis for a month. What is that to me? What is that to my grandmother in the village? All that have not been reviewed. And so government must begin to find ways in doing some, boost agriculture. Spend money to boost agriculture. The irrigation projects are there, the fertilizer projects are there, the food for planting for food and jobs. If they still want to do it well. Let it benefit the right people. We also said that as a government, the president must begin to show leadership. In this moment, I don't know if the president has really been able to address the state yet. He's talking bits and pieces all over the place.
Right.
He needs to address the state.
Right.
We think that government is very bereft of ideas. We also believe that they are incompetent, they are clueless. However, it behoves from them to do what is right.
Thank you. Wanda Madilo is a development analyst. He also speaks for the NDC. Earlier on, we had Manasseh Atakwahe, who is government spokesperson. He joined us in the earlier times of the program. My name is Ania Fampofu. Thank you. Enjoy your Friday. Entertainment review is next with a beautiful team.